Okay, Max is back. I'm really not in the mood for this, especially, but I have the opportunity. Jenny and Mike have gone into town to a baseball game. Mike's brother owns a bar in town, and he also is the coach for one of the baseball teams. Small town baseball is very popular here. Jenny was a little pissed because I didn't want to go with them. She thinks I should, there's not much to do here. There, there just isn't. And she thinks I should take part in whatever is available, uh, and be enthusiastic about it. But I declined. I really didn't want to go. I So I will use this opportunity to talk about a couple things that have come to mind. Jenny's a fixer. She's a good fixer. She's really good at it. She can fix plumbing. She can fix sick animals. She can fix damn near anything. But she can't fix Auntie, and this disturbs her very much. There's just no way she can make Auntie be the happy Auntie that she would like me to be. I truly am sorry about that for her sake, and I guess for mine. Um, and I don't blame her. It's not fun to be around someone who is chronically depressed, and I surely am that, I think. But there really is nothing Jenny can do about it. She can't snap her fingers and tell me to forget about it and get over it. And, she's tried everything. Some of it has been quite brutal. Bless her heart. And I think, I've again come to one of those points in time. This has happened before. I don't really know what, but a point in time where nobody knows what to say to me. And rather than say the wrong thing, they just don't say anything. I don't blame people for that. I guess that's a better policy than some policies. It makes me, I did want to remember to tell one of my new viewers, who was that, oh goodness, forgive me, I've forgotten. It was flat something, flat plate, flat somebody, forgive me. Anyway, I tried to respond to a message you left, and I got a mailer demon. So whatever communication you put through to me didn't have the right return address or something. And please try again if you would be so kind. Another person I wanted to speak to just briefly is Cal. Cal left me a very kind message. I appreciated it very much. I'm not quite sure exactly what the message referred to specifically, but in any case, I appreciated the message very much. All right, going on from that, there has been little news development as far as I can tell online today. I'm going to change screens, you guys, stand by. Okay, just so I don't have to look at myself, that's distracting. And, I'm kind of sorry that I found the button that puts Max in focus. I kind of liked the unfocused. version a little bit better. In any case, there was very little news breaking today. I have posted nothing. Usually I post something, but today I have posted nothing. I did watch a live stream of Trump in Davenport, Iowa. He seems to be saying all the right things. Watch the chat line on that for a little bit. Somebody on that chat line said Trump was God's candidate. That was kind of brilliant. Sam and Abby were here yesterday. You know, Sam is young. He's 24, and Abby is somewhere in that age group. They're very happy young people. They have good jobs. They're happy with each other. They like their companions. They're happy kids. We had some general conversation, the three of us, and I broached the subject just a little bit, and I inquired what they thought about the current events. I just left it open-ended, current events, and both of them just looked blank, and Sam stumbled around and he said, oh, you mean the, what is that, convention? They had absolutely no comprehension about any possible anything on the planet that might affect their lives. No comprehension and no interest. I don't think they're alone in that attitude. And so I didn't say more. Sam did expound just a little bit. His theory was that Hillary wants to be president just so she can claim being the first woman president. And I forget what his idea was that was Trump's motive. And Abby didn't say anything about any of it. She just kind of, she was petting the dog and, okay, going on. Mentioned a little bit about this idea of putting on the armor of God. One of the items in the wardrobe of the armor of God is a helmet of salvation. I am not sure exactly what that would mean, but I think mental preparation for unusual and drastic occurrences could fall under the category of a helmet of salvation. I do see a lot of prepper sites. The preppers are all, pounding their beats really hard, wanting everybody to stock up and have food reserves, water reserves, do all of that. I personally think that if one is not in a position to do that and hasn't already done it, then it's a little bit of a moot point, and there must be, perhaps there are other arrangements that you should be focused on instead. And one would be mental preparation. I'm going to talk just a little bit about this beheading business. That would be you cannot really imagine that. Crucifixion would be another unimaginable event in the United States. I remember once I was 8 years old, and for some reason I got up in the night and I came into the living room. I was barefooted and very quiet, and I came into the living room, and my mother was laying on the couch. I believe that she was unconscious, and one of her arms was hanging over the edge of the couch, and blood was dripping down her arm and from her fingertips into a pool of blood on the linoleum floor. And my father was squatted down beside her. He was squatted down on the floor. He had his pocket knife in his hand. And he was watching the drops of blood fall into the pool of blood on the linoleum floor. And I stepped a little bit closer, and the lacy hem of my nightgown brushed against him. And then he noticed that I was standing there, and he looked up at me. He didn't have time to put on a mask. And I saw into his eyes. And then he turned his head, and silently he raised the pocket knife, and I put out my hand, and he put that bloody pocket knife on the palm of my hand. And I carried it to the kitchen, and I ran it under the water faucet, and I washed the blood off of it. And I laid it on the drain board. And I began to shake. My teeth were chattering, and I began to shake. And I went back into the bedroom that I shared with my sister. And I got into the bed with her. We had separate twin beds, but I got into the bed with my sister. I have never known for certain what scene I had interrupted. I have never known for certain if my mother had done a suicide attempt by, slashing her wrist, or if my father had tried to kill her. I am not sure. I don't know exactly what I interrupted there. But I am pretty sure that what my father was doing while he was watching the blood drip into the puddle on the floor, he was assessing how long it would take for my mother to bleed out, and whether or not he could come up with an adequate alibi as to where he was and why he didn't know that his wife was bleeding to death in the living room. In the morning, my mother had no knowledge. She didn't know what had happened. And that is because that before she became unconscious, I would be pretty sure that I didn't know this when I was 8 years old, but now as I look back at that scene, I am pretty sure that before she became unconscious, in whatever this alteration with my father was, that she had been in one of her altered personality states. So that in her normal personality, she had no recollection of what she did or what happened or anything during the episodes when she was in her dissociated personality. My father evidently had taken her somewhere for professional care. The lesion on her arm was sutured and professionally wrapped with a white dressing and, you know, the adhesive tape that they used back in those days. And there was a bottle of pills. I think it was probably antibiotics. I don't know. Anyway, after I went back to bed, he evidently reconsidered his plan there and obtained appropriate care for her and took her back to the living room and left her there. They did not see each other again for many, many years. And after the moment that I saw into my father's eyes, I did not see my father again until I was 14 and he was a stranger. I did see him several times, 5 or 6 times during my life after that. The last time I saw him was on my 50th birthday. But never, ever, ever again did my father ever look me straight in the face where I could see into his eyes, because I had become the mirror of his conscience. And I was the only one who ever knew his guilty secret. And I did not tell my older sisters or any of my sisters about this incident until we were all in our 20s. Now, I'm bringing this up because from the chair I sit in now, I know one of the things that he was calculating was how long it would take for her to bleed out. People do not really know much about this kind of matter. Normal people don't know much about this sort of thing. I remember another time a teenager attempted suicide by taking a whole handful of pills, whatever there was, in the medicine cabinet in the bathroom over the bathroom sink. And much of that medication that he took was blood pressure pills. I found him on the hallway floor outside the bathroom door, and he was unconscious. But I remember something he said to me later, after he had recovered somewhat from this. He said to me that he didn't know, he was very surprised, he didn't know that dying was going to hurt. He said, I didn't know it would make me sick. And I didn't know dying would hurt. And I remember just being astonished. But, you know, the kid was, I don't know what, 14, 15 when this happened. But there is an ignorance. And I guess that's where I'm going with this. Because we've now had this horrendous story about the priest having his throat slit and or decapitated, beheaded, at the altar of a little church in France where he was conducting mass. These things conjure up horrible images. I'm going to hunt around here for the screen I have open on this. I hope I do have it. Oh, maybe I don't. Good grief. All right. Oh, stand by one. I am sorry to ask you to have to hold while I hunt this up. This is from a prepper site. I don't usually pay too much attention nowadays to the prepper sites, but this is from Celco. And Celco has been posting for a very long time before prepping became, you know, a popular topic. He survived a year in an inner city. I think it was in Kosovo, back during, I think this was in the Clinton administration, when that country underwent a horrendous CIA-inflicted regime change. And he was there and survived it, survived that experience, and began to write about it, and began to try to use his, such an awful experience, in some positive way to help prepare others. Anyway, Celco has posted a guest post today that, in view of these present circumstances, seems very appropriate. The guest post is called Myth Busting Knife Attacks, written by someone named Darren Laur, L-A-U-R, who says, recently I read an article on surviving an edged weapon attack. So we're not calling it a knife, we're calling it an edged weapon, where the writer spoke specific to knife wounds as they related to unconsciousness and death, which I found quite troublesome given the fact that his numbers just did not reflect the empirical experience data that I have witnessed over my 29 years of being a law enforcement professional. In this article, the author first quoted a book written by Captain W.E. Fairburn called Get Tough, How to Win in Hand-to-Hand Fighting, published in 1942. Okay, 1942. World War II was in progress at that time. On page 99 of this text, Fairburn provides the following information specific to loss of consciousness in seconds and death specific to knife wounds. And there is a chart here and some drawings. Captain Fairburn's timetable of death. Brachial artery, unconsciousness in 14 seconds, death in a minute and a half. Radial artery, unconsciousness, 30 seconds, death in 2 minutes. Carotid artery, unconscious, 5 seconds, death in 12 seconds. Subclavian artery, unconsciousness in 2 seconds, death in 3.5 seconds. Heart, unconsciousness instantaneous, death in 3 seconds. Okay, he goes on to say that much other work he has seen used Fairburn's times and estimates and all of that. I attempted to locate any medical literature surrounding the time that this book was published, 1942, to support the above data, but I was unable to do so. If anyone reading can provide me with the medical literature that supports Fairbairn's data from that time period, please send it my way. Based upon the above noted Fairbairn data, I began my literary review of the martial arts self-protection combatives academia. Boy, that's a title. Specific to unconsciousness and death, specific to knife wounds, and what I found was very surprising, if not troublesome. Much of the data supplied in these books, articles, and papers that I reviewed were just a rehash of Fairbairn's numbers, and others were anecdotal at best, and more often than not, just plain negligent. None, and I mean none, cited any medical literature to support their claims. Some stated that they had spoken to a medical professional, a doctor, paramedics, to validate their claims, but yet they did not provide the names of these medical professionals or their credentials, or even medical research links, which would have helped validate their published writings. After reading the above noted martial arts self-protection and combative academia, and being less than impressed with their reported data specific to unconsciousness and death as it relates to knife wounds, I too decided to connect with the medical professionals. Two of the doctors that I connected with are experts in their field of medicine. Both specialize in trauma care and critical care medicine, and have a plethora of firsthand experience in dealing with those who have been injured via an edged or pointed weapon. Dr. Lorne David Porayko, Porayko. Full-time critical care medicine anesthesiologist specialist in Victoria, Vancouver Island Health Authority. Critical care team leader, works in conjunction with Dr. Christine Hall. Martial arts background in judo, black belt level, MMA, I don't know what that stands for, and Krav Maga, Krav Maga. Somebody who is into martial arts might know what that's about. Honored to say that doctor, whose name I didn't pronounce correctly, is one of my full-time students. Dr. Christine Hall, full-time emergency medicine specialist in Victoria, Vancouver Island Health Authority, trauma team leader and educator. Previously program director for emergency medicine at the University of Calgary, master's degree in epidemiology from the University of Calgary, cross-appointed in the Department of Community Health Sciences through the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Calgary, and also the Faculty of Medicine's Department of Surgery at UBC. All right, so that's our authorities on this. They sound impressive to me. Shock. When it comes to unconsciousness or death attributed to an edged weapon attack, we are talking about what the medical community calls shock. Dr. So-and-so defines shock as the development of multi-organ failure due to insufficient oxygen being delivered to the tissue to meet their metabolic needs. Specific to shock as it relates to unconsciousness and death, doctors stated the following to me. The 154-pound male's circulating blood volume is about 70 milliliter per kilogram, which equals about 5 liters. cardiac output is about 5 to 7 liters per minute. That's how much blood your heart pumps, 5 to 7 liters per minute. Although if you weigh 154 pounds, you only have 5 liters of blood in your entire body. That's how fast the blood goes. All the great vessels of the body act as a conduit of approximately 15 to 20% of CO/minute, which equals about 1 liter per minute. The great vessels include the innominate artery, subclavian arteries, carotid, and some include the iliac arteries. The 4 atria, 2 ventricles, and aorta, those are parts of your heart, all conduct the full cardiac output and thus are well protected in the center of the body, behind the sternum, and in front of the thoracolumbar spine. So your heart is protected between bone structures. So why is the noted information important? Because hemorrhagic shock, blood loss, is based upon how much hydraulic fluid, blood in parentheses, is leaked from the body. When it comes to understanding hemorrhagic shock, I would guide you to the following links that were provided to me by the doctor, and I will put up these links at some point somewhere. The doctor advised that based upon the above noted link, the class 2 shock category would leave most dizzy and very weak. That would be blood loss between 750 and 1500 milliliters. A class 3 or class 4 shock category, 1500 milliliters to 2 liters of blood loss would leave most people with the inability to stand up. So you can lose quite a bit of blood and still be able to stand up. If you were in class 2 shock and you had lost 1500 milliliters, that would be a little less. It would look like a lot of blood, and it would be a lot of blood, but you would still be able to stand up. You would be dizzy and very weak. Specific to my questions about unconsciousness and death, if specific anatomical arteries or veins were cut, and given all the medical variables associated, the doctors had to make the following assumptions first before they could answer my questions. Number 1, there is no compression of a lacerated artery underway. You know, your old first aid class says apply pressure. That's what he's talking about. Or a tourniquet, no compression of a lacerated artery underway. This was irrelevant for a lacerated vein, however, due to the fact that a vein cannot be compressed. The subject, in number 2, the subject is previously healthy with a normal hemoglobin concentration and has a normal VO2 prior to being wounded. That's about oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells. So we're going to assume this patient was normal before he got cut up. Number 3, if an artery is the target, the artery is incompletely transacted, means the artery was not completely severed. Completely transacted arteries go into vasospasm and retract into their perivascular sheath, which markedly reduces bleeding and even stopping bleeding altogether in the case of smaller vessels. Did y'all hear that? If an artery is completely severed, the artery goes into vasospasm, it scrunches up, it pulls itself up closed and shut, kind of like what happens when you pull apart an angleworm. The two ends will pull themselves up tight and close. That's what happens, which reduces the bleeding a lot. If, however, the artery is not completely severed, and that's when the bleeding is much more profuse. On this point, the doctor stated that this is the reason that the Gurkhas were trained to twist their knives in the femoral artery after puncturing it, to avoid a clean surgical transaction, thus preventing the vasospasm and retraction into the perivascular sheath, and instead to intentionally cause a hole in the vessel sidewall, which is much more lethal. I didn't know what a Gurkha was until several months ago, and Dave Hodges started talking about Gurkhas. This is a fighting class of military men who seem to be Oriental, Asian in origin, and for some reason the British Army has a whole contingent of these Gurkhas, and they are said to be the worst, most lethal in hand-to-hand combat of any fighting force anywhere. So the doctor stated that this is the reason that the Gurkhas were trained to twist their knives in the femoral artery after puncturing it, so that they would avoid doing a clean surgical transaction, thus preventing the vasospasm and retraction into the perivascular sheath, and instead to intentionally cause a hole in the vessel sidewall, which is much more lethal. Just a clean stick with a knife, even if it does cut into artery, may not be a fatal wound, is one of the points I want you to get from this. These Gurkha guys had to be trained to inflict all the damage they possibly could with their knife, twist the knife in the femoral artery in order to induce death by bleeding to death. Going on. The fourth assumption. The adventitia, that's a saran wrap-like layer around the blood vessel, does not seal the wound. The doctor stated that this usually does happen in survivors, and or a clot does not form after blood pressure drops. So we're assuming that the adventitia does not seal the wound and that a clot has not formed after the blood pressure drops. The doctors also noted, although exsanguineous death from blood loss from a venous injury is much slower than an arterial one, because mean arterial pressure is usually at least 10 times central venous pressure. The venous injury is much more difficult to treat, and generally, if arterial injured patients survive to a hospital with manual compression, they will do well, whereas major venous injured patients often die even after getting to the operating room. Okay, what did that exactly say? Bleeding is much slower from a venous injury, a vein. But the venous injury is more difficult to treat. So generally, if somebody who has an arterial injury, if that person survives to get to the hospital because you have applied some kind of manual compression, they will do well, whereas major venous injured patients often die even after getting to the operating room. Of note, both doctors opined that the numbers provided by Fairburn and other combative martial arts instructors that I provided to them for review, specific to times for unconsciousness and or death, are way too short. Both stated that they believe that these numbers are based upon complete cessation of all cardiac output through the involved vessel, which is not the norm. In fact, the doctor brought to my attention that during the French Revolution, when thousands of people were beheaded by guillotine, the attending doctors documented the presence of vital signs in the body for up to 2 minutes. Okay, nobody ever told us about that. Going on. So based upon those 4 assumptions, here are the numbers that the doctors I consulted provided, specific to a level of hemorrhagic shock taking place, which would lead to unconsciousness or death in most situations. The carotid artery, approximately 2 to 20 minutes. So that's the big artery in your neck, one of them. The jugular vein, approximately 15 to 60 minutes. Okay, so we have our throat slit. That's the carotid artery and the jugular vein. Approximately 2 to 20 minutes. The jugular vein, 15 to 60 minutes. The vein, bleeds more slowly. So that's if you get your throat slit. Subclavian artery, approximately 2 to 20 minutes. That's the vein that is under your collarbone. The doctors also noted this is a special circumstance anatomically because this vessel is protected by the clavicle, your collarbone, and the first rib. It's sandwiched between them. If the subclavian article bleeds, the only way to compress it and repair it is to open the chest by thoracotomy. You cannot compress it. Patients usually die on the scene or en route to hospital. Subclavian vein takes approximately 15 to 60 minutes to bleed out. Okay, brachial artery, 5 to 60 minutes. The doctors also noted, pretty unusual to see these without compression by EMS, emergency medical service. In time of shit going down, there may not be any emergency medical service. But just so you know, pretty unusual to see these, a brachial artery bleed out, 5 to 60 minutes. The femoral artery, 5 to 60 minutes. The femoral is one of the biggest arteries in your body. The doctor also noted here, pretty unusual to see these without compression by emergency medical service. Aorta, or any part of the heart, approximately 1 to 2 minutes. The doctor stated that the heart conducts 100% of cardiac output, assuming transaction, and that the hole does not seal. It's still going to pump 100% of the blood that is flowing through it. Ventricular holes do usually seal, while the atrial ones do not, due to the orientation of the muscle fibers. So if you get stabbed in the heart, that heart is still going to conduct 100% of cardiac output somewhere. That blood will keep going somewhere. The other areas of note made by the doctors also included the popliteal artery located behind the knee, which would be similar but slightly less to cutting the femoral artery. The inferior vena cava can be attacked via a deep abdominal stab, similar to cutting the jugular vein. Exceptions. Both doctors stated that these are estimates based upon current medical literature and their first-hand experience. But both also stated that there are always exceptions to these estimates. Both gave examples where patients who had received severe knife wounds survived even with a heavy loss of blood. Some examples. One of the doctors had seen several patients with traumatic cardio something, a big hole in the heart, survive for 20 minutes before being treated. And you can survive for 20 minutes before being treated with a big hole in the heart. One of the doctors treated a patient who had been stabbed in the abdomen, where the knife hit the inferior vena cava. His belly was full of blood. He was conscious, although shocky, an hour after the injury when he arrived in the ER, and he survived. See, his heart kept pumping, and this, the blood that leaked from where it was supposed to go ended up in his belly. Belly was full of blood, but he survived. The doctor stated that they had seen patients who have bled out nearly their entire blood volume, but yet are still awake and talking, although looking bad, many minutes following an injury, and survived to tell their story. The doctor stated, so it is a mistake to underestimate a person's capacity to compensate for acute hypovolemia and anemia, hemorrhagic shock, even when very severe. This is especially true in the younger population. Conclusion. So why did I write this article? Much of the information being promulgated in the martial arts, self-protection, and combative industry specific to unconsciousness and death as a result of a knife attack, specific to blood loss, is inaccurate. All the stuff, drama we see on TV, a lot of that is inaccurate also. We have many false impressions I wanted to provide those who are looking to share current and accurate medical opinion with the above noted information, hoping that it will go viral in our industry. For those who don't and continue to teach inaccurate information, shame on you. Number 2, those who teach others how to fight with a knife and state that if you cut or stab a person here or there, an attacker will die in seconds, are both willfully blind and being irresponsible to their student in most cases. Those who teach others how to fight with a knife need to absorb the information in this article and start teaching from a medically researched knowledge base. The most important reason for this article is survival. Words are powerful and can create their own reality. If you believe that you will die in seconds because your radial artery has been cut in a knife attack, and your instructor told you, and you believe him, that you only have 30 seconds to live before you die from blood loss, then you likely will die, as can be seen from the numbers provided by the doctors. Even if one receives a severe cut or stab to a major blood vessel or organ, you can still fight for several minutes, not seconds. You can still fight for several minutes and even longer and still survive. As Dr. Hall stated, the decision to survive, it is that intangible thing that cannot be measured, and I think is part of the reason that some people survive and some don't. You have to decide ahead of time that you are going to live. The author of this article, Darren Lauer, also known as the White Hatter, has dedicated his life to public safety and is a recently retired and highly respected staff sergeant with the Victoria City Police Department with over 29 years of law enforcement experience, and is a certified advanced open source intelligence / social media investigator with a strong interest and background in online and social media investigations. Darren is an internationally court-recognized safety and workplace violence prevention expert advocate, award-winning published author, and highly sought-after international keynote speaker who specializes in the area of personal safety and self-protection, both online and offline. All right. So when we hear about or read about a description such as the killing of the old priest at Mass in France, and somebody describes a machete. A machete. I don't think I've ever seen a machete in real life. They're not common household objects. I have seen some really horrendous knives that are made to be weapons. I've had a couple of them in my possession even. They look really, really horrendous. But in reality, what kind of a knife blade would it take to sever someone's head from the body? Because, for one thing, there's bones in there. Have you ever had the experience of cutting up, preparing a whole chicken for cooking? You're going to fry this chicken, and you know, it's like it's harder than it looks. It's harder than it looks. If someone were able to struggle, it would be even harder to actually make the necessary incision, do the actual cutting, and then somehow manage to, I'm just saying, this would not be as easy to do. And it certainly wouldn't be instant. What a gruesome topic. What the hell am I even talking about this for? Because actually we're setting the scene for the next piece of the next article that I'm going to put up. And the key to the whole thing is the mental preparation. And especially that you have to decide ahead of time that you are going to live. That's the mental preparation. Okay. I think I will stop at that point. Okay. As I said, I reached one of those points where no one knows what the hell to say to me. I don't blame you. I don't know what to say to me either. Okay, talk to you later.